All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another webinar with Recognize. I'm Grande, CEO of Recognize app, where we help companies boost employee engagement by making recognition, rewards, and company values easy to track and celebrate across your organization. I'm here in Seattle. I have to say I'm pretty happy. I think we're all in a good mood over here because of the Seahawks going to the Super Bowl. So I'd love for everyone to chime into the chat. Where are you calling in from? What team do you root for? I don't care if it's hockey, your son's little league, college basketball. Root for your team, and maybe that'll indicate where you are. Like go Bears, for instance. Thanks, Aaron, for chiming in. Go Broncos, Yankees. I love it. We got international folk from Northern Ireland. Broncos. Go sports in general. I love that. I'm just in Texas and I'm just for sports. That's so great. Honestly, that's part of the reason why I love being in cities that have the Super Bowl. I used to live in San Francisco, and the 49ers or the Giants or the Warriors, they all were champion teams. And it's just the energy in the city whenever there's a big event is just really strong, especially in the winter. Football warms our hearts here in the winter. So great. I see North Carolina. Awesome. Rooting for the Seahawks. Love that. Minneapolis. Thanks for having you. Heart goes out to Minneapolis. I got Bay Area, more Texas. I love that. I used to live in Austin as well. So I love spending a lot of time in the west part of the Texas as well as east as well. The third coast. Cleveland. I love that. All these people joining in. Thanks for everyone coming. Beautiful thing about live webinars rather than watching a podcast or something like that is we're in this together. There's a group of people here looking. There's 60 people here. There's 60 people that you can connect with. Maybe someone you saw in your area. This is an opportunity. We're all here in this moment together, coming together in synchronicity. So please reach out to anyone you want. Keep the conversation going in the chat. We have a couple of people monitoring the chat. I'm going to try to monitor as well. But we're here because this is part two of a two-part series on total rewards as a system. That's what we talked about in the previous talk. We'll have a link for that if you weren't there for it. We'll have a link to watch the first one, but essentially total rewards should be a system, not a set of individual programs, right? We have benefits, compensation, recognition. We want them all to work together to create clarity, trust, and of course, measurable outcomes, right? So, we're here today because recognition is just one piece of that puzzle, and we're going to focus on that, not just because it's not necessarily the flashiest, but because it's the most powerful lever managers actually can control on a day-to-day basis. Just you can make that decision, you can make that change, and put recognition as part of your workflow as a manager, as a company, as a director, and make a huge difference right off the bat. So instead of thinking about recognition as a culture add-on, right, it's more of a strategic asset. It's a campaign, not just a launch and then a moment. You're actually creating this continuous system. And we're going to talk a lot about that kind of continuous system, right? Real culture isn't built on big moments. It's built on micro moments managers create every day, right? What they're reinforced, what they acknowledge, and what they slide, right? So in this session, we're going to talk about how recognition can be woven into your daily workflows, become a manager multiplier, right? With clear priorities, fast feedback loops, higher output, better retention, right? No culture campaigns required, just the habit that we can hopefully tie into existing habits. So let's move on here into the presentation. So we talked about this a little bit in the first one, right? This idea of a recognition revolution, where it's a fundamental shift in thinking about workplace rewards, rather than viewing them as isolated programs or annual initiatives, right? Once a year things, right? Or ad hoc big events. We examine rewards as a continuous system that reinforces the desired behaviors and produce measurable organizational goals and signals. So we find that recognition emerges as the fastest lever that you can pull in the system and the most immediate and scalable way to connect daily actions with company values and the company goals and outcomes. I think we've been in HR revolution for a long time. The Economist points to how many more people are in the HR field now than before. It's a bigger org than it used to be. It's a more respected org. I think back to when I got into HR tech around 2013, And, if you built a HR tool that just simply worked well and looked nice, I mean, back to the ADP days when, before kind of this revolution of technology, think about today, where if you're not buying an HR tech solution with an AI component, at least you're one step behind, right? So I think if you look in your own career, you may have the same job title you had 10 years ago, but what you do, I think, has changed a lot. And we're going to continue to progress very rapidly in the age of AI. So let's go into the first key insight here, right? That the idea of a culture campaign trap, right? So culture is a management system. Culture doesn't fail because people don't care. It fails because managers aren't given the right systems to run every day, right? So when organizations conduct culture as if one-offs or sporadically, what happens is they fail to create lasting change. And so these following types of campaigns share common characteristics that limit their effectiveness. So there's big launches, one-off events, posters and slogans, and daily reinforcement. And these are different degrees of how much of a trap they are, right? But I think big launches, I think we've all been there, where we've done a big splashy kickoff, right? Maybe we get executive buy-in, right? And it generates initial excitement, but then the lack of follow through leads to it falling off, right? Or one-off events, nothing wrong with a company picnic, of course, or sending a team on vacation to Hawaii to an offsite, but these things do feel disconnected from the actual work environment. So although they're fun and they create this kind of these stories within the company, which is positive, it doesn't have that continuous connection. And then, posters and slogans. I remember visiting, Facebook in the early days when they had, the posters that said, move fast and break stuff, which of course they don't do anymore after so many times they end up, it's like going down. So they don't do that so much anymore, but they still have those posters. They still have slogans on their walls, and it's part of a cohesive strategy. You can go into the bathroom in Facebook, and they have coding challenges on the wall, which is pretty interesting. So it's part of their culture, right? So posters can be very useful, but when it's just simply there to decorate the office and not integrated into the culture or the decision making, the type of decision making you want, then it feels, again, disconnected. And then so if there's not any kind of systems to reinforce this, right? When you have no daily reinforcement, the absence of systems that embed culture and values into everyday management is where things can fall apart. So really the fundamental problem here is culture campaigns rely on memory rather than systems. So without daily reinforcement mechanisms, even the most inspired messages can fade within weeks. So that's what we're trying to avoid here, is having things having long-lasting strength and unity in the company. So, but let's face it, there is a reality here. The reality is culture isn't what you launch; it's what the managers reinforce when no one's watching. And at the same time, I think we talk to managers who they feel overloaded, right? We talk to managers that say they don't have the right training to be a true people person, right? And at the same time, they have responsibility of their culture. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Oh my gosh. Let's go ahead and pull that up. Let's go ahead and share. Didn't realize, sorry. So essentially, it's just a visual of everything I'm talking about here. And let's make sure I can see the chat as well. Just give me a second here. Awesome. All right. All good. We have still a lot of content here. So as I mentioned, managers feel overloaded, they lack the training, and then they are responsible for the culture. So it's a double whammy here. So the truth is, managers don't need more inspiration. They need systems that can remove friction, right? That allows them to shine in the ways that they can shine and supports them in the ways that they want to do better at, right? So let's go keep moving here. So what can we do about that, right? So like I said, culture is built in those micro moments. So performance doesn't change in offsites and annual performance reviews necessarily. It changes in those interactions on a day-to-day basis, especially between managers and employees. So, what do these micro moments look like? So first of all, we have the feedback. So we want to be able to make quick course corrections. A good time to do that is in one-on-ones. Also being able to have meaningful recognition. So we're going to talk about systems on doing that in this webinar. And then also being able to course correct, right? So addressing misalignment before those small issues turn into big issues. And that's what I'm talking about with the feedback, right? If you have strong relationships with your staff, your employees, you are real, you're authentic, you show up, then you are able to have respectful conversations and not worry about people pushing back. If you're doing all those things right, people pushing back on that feedback, that's a bigger problem. It may not be actually the manager. I think oftentimes, even as managers, we don't realize that, what we're saying is actually true. People can push back on it, and then you start questioning yourself. But if you do all the right things, right, especially when you have recognition, you have that positive connection with your employees, that timely feedback won't be as harsh, and then you can make quick course corrections. A manager yesterday with me over lunch, a director, was telling me how he starts off one-on-ones with people every week, and then if they don't need as much help, or maybe they're it's not as useful because they are self-sufficient, and it turns into every other week, right? And then it becomes a meeting every month, right? And then if there's any issues, then you can start pulling those one-on-ones back. And we're going to talk a little bit more about one-on-ones later. But these micro moments, they compound over time. When managers are given the tools to make it effortless, culture becomes a byproduct of good management rather than a separate initiative. So let's talk about how recognition is a manager multiplier, right? Recognition isn't just about being nice, it's about being clear. So yes, if you do generic recognition, there are benefits to that. There are retention benefits, and we're going to talk about some stats in a little bit on that. But you can actually go a step further, and we'll talk more about that as well. So the beautiful thing is when recognition is used strategically, so that next level beyond generic recognition becomes a force multiplier, where managers can lead more effectively, right, with the same amount of energy. So we all want to be able to do things effectively. We want to, a manager needs to, or director, you want to be able to spend an hour with somebody and get 20, 40 hours of positive work. If you're a manager and you're putting an hour into something and then you're getting an hour back, that's not sustainable. So we want to reinforce those priorities, and that's what recognition does, is when you can recognize when people are hitting their goals, right? It's as easy as that. And then clarifying expectations. So public recognition shows the entire team what good looks like, right, through concrete examples. So positive reinforcement is so powerful in that way, right? And then lastly, speeding up the feedback loop. So real-time recognition provides immediate positive reinforcement. It helps companies and employees connect their actions with outcomes faster than, let's say, a quarterly review. Right? Really, a quarterly review, it's a review of what's already happened, right? Whereas recognition is what's happening right now. So let's keep moving along here. So the most successful recognition programs are ones that are in your workflow already. In fact, I'm just going to pause my screen just for a moment and pull up an infographic that we put together based off of a survey recently with World at Work. And what they found from surveying 290 leaders in total rewards is that technology integration went from, in 2024, from the 10th spot of importance to the 5th spot. So it jumped all the way to 5, right? And I think that ties into the fact that, strategic alignment. So aligning the goals of the company is a top priority with a recognition and rewards program. And that's because then it's already in the tools you're using, right? And there was one other, and competitiveness as well. So ensuring market-aligned compensation remains a primary strategic objective. So, you want the best-in-class rewards, you want it in the tools you're already using, and you want to tie it to the company goals. And this is what total rewards leaders are saying for this coming year in 2026. So how do you integrate it? Well, it depends on what you're using. So if you're using Slack, fantastic. There's recognition tools you can integrate into Slack. If you're using Microsoft, honestly, it's even better because it's a cohesive system of tools. Like Recognize, we're in Outlook, we're in SharePoint, we're in Teams, right? So if you're just using email, you can use Recognize in Outlook. We have customers who have frontline workers, deskless employees. That's why we connect with them via text message. We have award certificates that can be printed out by managers. We have a TV mode so people can see it in the hallways of a hospital, for instance. So you want the recognitions visible in the flow of what people do. I've been to offices where in the lobby they'll have a printout on the wall, or maybe it's a sandwich board of the company values, which is great. But how are people showing those values? What does it mean to show those values? And that's the next level that you can do with something like Recognize or a board, or just creating your own intranet recognition program that lives in Teams or in your intranet. But if you're looking for a third party, reach out to Recognize. We can talk more about that and how to help you with that. But if recognition requires a separate ceremony or logging into another platform, it won't scale. So that's what we're trying to emphasize here. Awesome. And another point here is that frequency beats intensity every time. So, the traditional approach to recognition is that annual award ceremony where, one or two people are recognized and then a bunch of people are feeling left out, right? And then, or maybe it's that quarterly event in the town hall, or maybe it's nomination based, the employee of the month, which is nice, but it'd be better if it was tied to the values and more consistent and based off of more data rather than just who you remember at the end of the quarter. So instead, move to an always on recognition program where we build daily habits. We have continuous feedback loops, both positive and constructive as well. And the result will be the culture becomes embedded into the daily operations, right? Consistent reinforcement creates lasting cultural change. So what can we do to make this as easy as possible? So it's about a couple hours a month for a manager, right? And I recommend this to anyone who works with anybody. And even as a peer, it's good to have this reflection, have this meditation. So the second insight here is that recognition reduces the manager cognitive load when you create a system. So we call this a 10-minute manager cycle. So 10 minutes or 5 minutes, end of the day, then we have that Friday recognition where you think back to the previous week, maybe look through the recognitions that your team has been sending, and then having that monthly reflection as well. So, and that can, these are all kinds of different, scopes on how much you look at it. So end of day could be like literally what did someone do that day, right? That was awesome, going above and beyond, and you want to highlight that. Friday is more like what was the pattern that you saw over the last week, right? And then lastly is that connection of the so I'm getting a note here. Yeah, let's do the poll. If I missed it earlier, let's go ahead and just do it now. Yeah, so what is the hardest part about recognition, right? So what are you finding it hard? Is it the manager consistency, making it meaningful, proving impact, or is it getting buy-in? Okay, we got the results here. Manager consistency, that's exactly what we're talking about. So I really love that. So looking at the notes here. Yeah, making it meaningful, that's interesting. And that's where those prompts come in, right? So if we can provide managers with a prompt of what to look for based off of the company values, especially, that can be really helpful. Here's what you should be looking at specifically based off of the values that we have. So that can be really helpful. And then, yeah, manager consistency, like literally just putting a 5 o'clock, 5-minute meeting on your calendar. That's obviously free. You can book on top of it. Can really help to just create that habit. And then Friday as well, like end of day, have that on your calendar. It's as easy as that. With Recognize, we obviously remind managers, what is something awesome Jess has done, right? Like that's what we do in the app, but you can just put it in your calendar. Yeah, so Alexandra asked, do you have a recommendation on recognition in public channel versus a direct message? For us, I think it depends on the employee. It's good to know the employee when you onboard an employee. Do you prefer public recognition or do you want more private? what kind of person that person is. I think introverts usually want more private recognition, extroverts more public. It also depends on what kind of thing you're recognizing. We mostly do exclusively public recognition in our company because it just feels natural. Sometimes we do, above and beyond, recognition that can be worth significantly more money, possibly. And so those are private, just for the sensitivity of the value or the badge specifically. In Recognize, you can, all the values or behaviors are badges, and each one can have their own gamification and restrictions. So our badges, some of them can be only private, right? So when it doesn't have the person sending it doesn't have to think about should it be public or private. It is private. So that's also interesting to do. But yeah, generally it's better to do in a public channel because let everyone see it, so that they know what good looks like I said earlier. And so a lot of times though, in the moment when something awesome happens, I'll personally say, privately, I'll say, I'm already working with that person. Hey, that was really cool. That was awesome. That's all I say. That was really cool. Like that wouldn't be a recognition, official recognition, because it's vague. And we'll talk more about that a little bit in a moment. But then, maybe at the end of the week on my Friday reflection, I can think back, oh yeah, that was really cool what that person did. And then I can write a formal recognition that describes what they did specifically. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to write messages coming up. Let's keep going here. So from kudos to competencies. So, this is, again, is taking it from, hey, great work, just simply generic recognition, which is important. But, generic recognition can drive retention, but doesn't necessarily drive great performance. So we want to reach a level where we're doing strategic recognition that connects everyday actions to specific behaviors, values, and competencies that then define the success of your organization. So these specific things are behaviors, values, and competencies. So call out the specific actions you want repeated, like how someone approaches a problem, collaborates with a team, right, or served a customer, very specific situations. Be specific in your message to them about that. That should be public. And then next is anchor to the company value. So tie recognition specifically to those values, showing concrete examples of what innovation looks like, what being an ally looks like, what exemplar means, and then that will help people see what the values mean in practice. And then lastly, recognize the development of critical skills and capabilities that drive individual growth and then thus organizational performance. So just look for those things. It's important. So this is where recognition stops being nice and starts improving business outcomes. So awesome. Cool. So what high-performing teams do differently, right? So we've analyzed recognition patterns across thousands of companies, and we've identified what distinguishes the highest performing teams. And the difference isn't necessarily volume or budget, but definitely is consistency and clarity, right? So back to the number one poll answer being the lack of consistency, tie recognition to the team huddle that may happen on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Have that be a post task for the manager to do or the employees to do. Reinforce it, bring it up. It's as easy as that. But yeah, consistency over volume. What we see in these top teams is that recognition doesn't spike only when things are going well, right? It's a steady, constant stream of wins, right? We're celebrating the wins of the company. So, instead of, there might be issues that come up that may disrupt it, right? Things like end of quarter pressure or seasonal swings. But you want recognition to just continue to happen. So that consistency is really important, right? It becomes normal to have that consistency. It becomes part of what you do, right? And then next is specificity over generality, right? Things like great job, thanks for the hard work. Sure, you can say that in the moment privately, but in that recognition, that official recognition, you want to do more than that, right? So be more specific, right? Include context. What was done? Why does it matter? How does it connect to a department goal or a value or an outcome, right? And this should be in the prompt that goes in that calendar invite. You can have the managers do it themselves or set out invite to every manager Friday, to value these things, to start that habit. If every day is too much in the beginning, right? Every month, honestly, is too little. So on a Friday, it's great to just have that on the calendar. Okay, and then next is distribution over concentration. So this is the last pattern that we want to look at. It's, how common we see the recognition trend to cluster around specific people, right? It's very common that we see just the same people, right? The loudest, the most visible, the most extroverted, right? So it's good to practice to make it more distributed across roles, using data to see, and we'll talk about that a little bit more on those leading indicators. How can we make sure that it doesn't just mean that loudest people are being recognized? So the strongest teams don't recognize louder, they become more consistent and more clear. And again, that's through putting recognition as part of the workflow, the daily or weekly or monthly workflow. Awesome. So I touched on that just a moment ago, which is the kind of the leading indicators. One of them is the one-on-one. I was supposed to do the poll earlier. I'd love to do the poll for the one-on-ones. Jess or Ru, can you help me do the poll? Is that possible? For the one-on-ones? If not, that's totally fine. Just let me know. Awesome. I really would love to learn more about your one-on-one setup. We're exploring that more here at Recognize, what we can do about that. Every company needs to do one-on-ones, but it seems like people do it all over the place. Like they're conducted in different ways. There's not consistent data, but the data from a one-on-one can be a leading indicator. And we're going to talk about signals in just a second here after we finish the poll. Yeah, Elizabeth makes a good point in the chat that it's not just about creating a recognition, it's about liking, commenting, boosting the recognitions. Really good point. We're actually redesigning our recognition cards right now to encourage more commenting, boosting, liking, emojis on the recognition. So that should be live later this quarter. So yeah, definitely want to have people be more involved. It doesn't have to be a recognition. It can simply just be an emoji or a comment. And those increased interactions can be really powerful. We send out a daily digest of recognitions as well, so people can look through them in their inbox and then click on them and then go comment on them. So this is very telling, this poll here. So I just, really interesting results to see that, one-on-ones, we just kind of depends on the manager, right? We just let them do the best, right? It's not standardized. We're not pulling data out of it. That can be an incredible signal that managers and leaders can use to detect early warning signs. So there are tools out there. We're exploring those as well, creating a tool within Recognize for one-on-ones, creating a tool for feedback within Recognize. So look for that in the future. But very interesting poll. Thanks so much for sharing that. Almost nobody is using the data. I shouldn't say that. 20% or so, 15% of people are doing something. It is consistent. They're using a tool. So that's good. That's good. But yeah, 50% just depends on the manager, right? All right, let's keep it going. So the last key insight here is that recognition is an early warning system. Right? When recognition slows down, something else is already broken down. And that signal just got there first. So, attrition is a lagging indicator. Employee survey is a lagging indicator. You're taking data from the past. Don't feel bad that you're doing that. It's good to be doing surveys. It's good to be looking at attrition data. But what's awesome is being able to also marry that with leading indicators. We're just continuing to expand beyond as HR leaders from just compliance to data to now predicting. And that's a beautiful thing with leading indicators. So recognition is a signal that leaders can trust, and recognition data provides leading indicators of organizational health that surface problems before they appear in engagement surveys or retention metrics. So when recognition patterns change, something else may have changed first, and we should look at that. So some things you can look at in the recognition program. So participation rates, percentage of team members giving or receiving recognition. So if you have a program and you have a baseline, then you can now monitor whether or not that's being effective or that's changing. Another one is the velocity, how quickly recognition spreads can indicate cultural momentum and manager engagement, right? So, we recommend recognizing someone within a week of something awesome happening. Another thing is manager activity. So, manager participation correlates with team performance and employee satisfaction. So that's important to look at. And then also network spread. So how much recognition is happening across teams. This indicates cross-company collaboration. Going back to Elizabeth's point, the comments, the emojis, these things can indicate things as well, indicate health of the organization. So the more leading indicators that we can put into our bucket of data, the more likely we can actually get ahead of something. I mean, if you do a survey, a quarterly survey, annual survey, and there's a low score, how long has that been an issue? I mentioned, I think on the last webinar, Amazon has their connections where every day you're asked a question and the person next to you is asked a different question. So it's not all the same question. And then that data every week is analyzed for the health of the business. How much do you believe in the vision of the company? How much do you believe in your manager? Things like that. Let's read a comment here. Just review your data. Put it, again, as an HR admin, HR leaders, put in your calendar to look at the data. We often say it only takes about 30 minutes to look at the recognition data on a monthly basis, and it indicates the health of the organization. Recognize we tell you the difference between, the delta between this month and the last month, this quarter and the previous quarter. So you should be able to see a baseline and see the difference. So let's talk about some stats, right? I have never seen a survey or data point that shows that recognition has hurt the organization. It's always positive, but it can be with anything that is a micro moment. It's hard to analyze and see the bigger picture when it's really all those small moments added up, right? But it is a predictive signal, and one of the things we've seen through the data, for instance, Achievers Workforce Institute, their report last year showed a 45% engagement increase with people who are recognized. We've also seen from the employee recognition statistics in the US, a 20% improvement on productivity with teams that are consistently is the key, right? It doesn't have to be big, just consistent recognition on their teams. And then another metric we pulled up here is that in Gallup's poll, people who are not recognized are 45% likely to leave in 2 years. Imagine being a high achiever, you come to an organization and no one ever says you're doing a good job. You're not celebrating the wins. Winners want to be associated with winners, and they want to celebrate those wins. So create that culture of winning. At our company, we have a weekly scorecard. I highly recommend having a weekly scorecard for your group. It creates ripple effects. Now I do a weekly scorecard for my own personal life as well. And this allows you to navigate a lot faster. So, and the whole point to that scorecard is to celebrate those wins. Awesome. So I just want to say one more thing, which is a key insight that patterns matter more than prediction, right? We don't need 100% participation in the recognition program to see an impact. Organizations that reach 70% manager participation maintain three recognitions per employee per month, we'll see measurable results. So just 3 times a month per employee is all it takes for managers to be successful, and you should put that into your guide for them. Something else we can talk about here is kind of wrapping up a little bit, getting closer to the end. What can you do right now in the next 30 days, right? So simple steps you can do each week. And we have a poll here at the end here as well. Yeah. And I think we have another poll. We'll double check on that in a second. But, here it is. Here's the poll. Time managers spend. All right. So the last poll. So how much time do your managers realistically spend on recognition today? Let's be honest. Less than 5 minutes a week, 5 to 10 a week. Don't know. Varies wildly. What do you think? Okay, here comes results. Okay, across the board. So we have 25% saying less than 5 minutes a week, 16% 5 to 10, 40% says, all depend. Yeah, it's so true. It's kind of left up to them, kind of like one-on-one. So there's just a lot of things that are just left up to individual differences, which is really not acceptable. I think we need to create more standards for what we should expect of how people show up to work. And I believe that creates a tighter ship as well. So it makes me think about rock climbing, the rock climbing gym, how everyone has to belay the exact same way in a climbing gym. It's really an insurance policy. But you get climbers who come in who've been climbing for decades and they know what's best and they've been doing what they do. And they get in arguments with the staff. They don't get that it's an insurance policy. It's not about not trusting them as a climber. So I think about that for managers as well. That if you ask a manager, hey, I want to standardize one-on-ones, I want to standardize recognition, and they push back on that, that's concern. You want people who you want people to be able to be themselves, but within the systems that are successful within your organization. So what are some things that we can do right now as HR leaders to start doing this? So first of all, make it easy on your managers. They're already busy. They're already working hard. Same with your employees. Put it in the tools they're already using. Do that right away. You can create a form in Microsoft or in Slack or use a tool like Recognize. With things like make.com, with Zapier, it's really easy to have an email now become a recognition, right? An email can come into a certain inbox. It then goes through an AI agent. It then generates a recognition in a spreadsheet and posts it back to Teams or Slack. Of course, you can use third-party tools like Recognize to get things like concert tickets, Amazon gift cards, Starbucks, swag, experiences. If you want to take recognition to the next level, there's third parties like us, but it's not totally required. The second thing you can do, and then next week we recommend, is aligning recognition to company values. So it's not hard to add in a form field to have the values of the company be part of that recognition form. We, again, use them as badges, a badging system for gamification. But just putting the values into the organizational recognition program. It's not hard to do. And then in the third week, one thing we can do here is we can provide those prompts and templates that can go in those calendar invites. There's descriptions of the values, giving prompts that reduce friction on how to say a great recognition, how to write a great recognition. And then the fourth week, let's actually start tracking signals. Let's look at the data, look at manager activity, and look at those leading indicators that can help you make better decisions in the future. And then I see great comment on the mobile app. Yes, mobile app makes it so easy. You're having coffee in the morning, you're looking at your phone, go look at the recognitions, go send a recognition. At end of day, you're commuting home on the bus or the train, great time to send a recognition. So that's totally true. Thank you for that. Awesome. So that wraps up our talk here. Hopefully you take away at least one thing you can do differently, one new process or improvement that you can utilize. Things like we just went over a moment ago. Yeah, great point by Elizabeth. Recognition rock stars. Oftentimes the cultural leaders aren't always the people in the C-suite. You can find people that are really passionate about recognition and culture, and they're going to show up in those programs. You're going to see that content, and reach out to them. Have them be an ambassador to your cultural programs. Have them be part of those correspondence, that internal marketing. And yes, we're going to definitely share all the slides from the presentation. Please do come to our next webinar. There's the link at the bottom. We're going to be, I think, sharing it here. Yes, Jess already shared it out. Follow me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I'm always down to have a conversation. If I haven't reached out, I will reach out usually within a week or two, depending on the volume of work I'm in, but I always reach out back out. But please do come. We're having it next month here in February, so coming right up, and excited to see you there. All right. Thanks everybody for coming.